What's going on, Macro Perspective peeps? We've got another great episode today for y'all. Before we get into that, please like, comment, and subscribe. And most importantly, share. Not only are you sharing to help the person that we have on as a guest today to maybe help out their business and their media, but also at the same time, you might be helping out somebody like us with a small business and a family and maybe, some mouths to feed. So with that being said, today I have an amazing guest. Andrew Coates. Am I saying that last name correct, or is it
Absolutely. People every once in a while ask, and I'm like, yes, it's a classically like English name, right? I'm originally from
Yeah.
Eastern Canada. People are like, is it somehow like a Latin name or a Spanish name? I'm like, no, no. Coates. So
Coates.
thank you
I
guys.
love it. I'm so excited to have you here. I mean, you have a dossier here that our producer gave us, and it was crazy. And it even said at the end, they're like, "This is absurdly long," but I'm going to continue anyways, or something like that. But what really caught my eye is you've been really in the fitness industry for a long time, and you've been a writer, you've been a speaker, you have your own media with your own podcasting. With that being said, Andrew, just mind introducing yourself a little bit, but more so, what are you excited about today? Like, where are you at today, and what are you excited about?
Okay, quick introduction. Been a personal trainer for almost 13 years. I've been working out for more than 20. I got started late in the industry. I was 32 when I first started, which I'm grateful that I was able to get involved in an industry of something that I've been doing kind of for myself. I fell into it. I wasn't the passionate, 19-year-old who wanted to become a personal trainer. It was a very different journey. And I've been a bar owner and I've worked for banks and I have a Bachelor of Commerce degree from a very past life and whatnot, worked in a casino. So life experience obviously has been very valuable in this. And along the way, that led to a podcast with a good friend, and now it's just me. And that led to me starting to write for my own website, which led to an invitation to write for T Nation, which turned into Men's Health and Muscle Fitness and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. And then deciding that I was going to invest effort in social media, specifically Instagram, to complement everything else I was doing. I just consistently started writing for that every day, probably in late 2019. And then that, of course, over the course of a few years has blown up to be, I think large compared to most. So that's been a fun vehicle to use. I'm excited about the fact that I'm in a very unique position. I get to earn a great livelihood doing something I really enjoy doing. It doesn't always feel like work, which allows me to work some pretty serious hours. Obviously, that impacts the client directly in front of me. But with all the other media growth, the public speaking, you name it, the writing, I've been able to extend that reach to a lot more people, both coaches and the general population. And there will always be these people who are negative about social media, right? And you see this sort of rhetoric. It's like, oh, there's no relationship between, the quality of someone's information and the size of their following. And usually someone who says that usually has a very small following, and it's usually because it's a sour grapes mentality. I have a lot of friends and a lot of people I follow and respect in the industry who have very large followings, who are incredibly evidence based and have the highest of integrity. Laundry list. Don't even need to get into the names. Yes, we know there are quote influencers and bad faith actors out there, but I would rather spend my time, focus, energy on highlighting the positive, sharing good information. And if that legacy leads to more coaches staying in an industry and a business they love and realizing this is a long-term career that you can earn a good livelihood within, and those people are doing better work for more people in front of them, then what happens? We're making the world a better place, even if sometimes it does feel like a drop in the ocean. So
Yeah.
that's my mentality about this stuff. Um, I'm not interested in it. You know what? Accolades feel nice. It feels nice to be recognized for work. Sure, that's human. But I'm not interested in playing status games within this. I really do try to take this infinite game mindset. Simon Sinek's book kind of popularized that. And showing up consistently, trying to make sure that the good overwhelmingly outweighs the bad. And you do that every day. Some of the messages and the positive stuff makes some of the negatives more than worthwhile. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel about it all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I mean, that alone right there, that ethic of infinite game, I think you could be successful in anything that you can do, Andrew. Doesn't matter if it's fitness or whatever. It could be anything. And that's kind of like what Marcos and I are all about. this podcast really was about, started in health and wellness, but it's going more into other things like business development, relationships, finance, whatever. Just because it's a personal develop type of podcast. But we started in the fitness and wellness industry, nutrition industry, and you kind of realize like this is an infinite game. There will always be new humans that always need new help every day. And you have to get better at being a little bit more empathetic or even just being compassionate in the way that you present this data. Because like you said, there is evidence based data, and there are people that we know that that they present it. But sometimes, how come this stuff is still being, passed by for this hot chick or hot guy on Instagram? What is going on? So it definitely is this. It's this no, never-ending mission of really helping people out where they're at and trying to get them from A to Z, from good to great.
The industry is always, people are always going to be drawn to immediate gratification, right? And there will be people who will always be drawn. Keep in mind, there's a dynamic that requires two ends of this, right? There needs to be a buyer and needs to be a seller. And sometimes the transaction is in dollars, but a lot of the time the transaction is in attention and time. So there will be an audience that self-selects to want to follow the sexualized fitness influencer. Okay, fine. And then there will be the fitness influencer who decides that, well, there's a market for this, so I'm going to sexualize my image. And we can fixate on that. We can spend a lot of time complaining about it. We can demand that we police that out of the industry and that we must regulate it and there must be laws against these sort of people. It's never going to happen. It's kind of another sour grapes attitude. And I think usually the kind of people who spend the most time really fixated on this usually crave something that they see someone else has that they don't. And usually, again, that is status, right? So they want that status. And up to that point, they have been unwilling or unable to put in the time, the effort, and unlock the process or be patient enough with the process to achieve what they think other people have and the benefits that they think those people get from it. Now, sometimes those overly sexualized accounts that share less than credible information, sometimes they're outright fake, right? So there's a lot of that stuff too. But I think the problem with the coach who spends all their time with the victim mindset and that narrative, one, is they're also not concurrently doing all the things to build the media, to be of service, to share, to support, to create, learn the skills that's going to help them grow the thing that they want, and therefore they resent in other people. That's one thing. And two, they think that, well, if we can magically get rid of all the bad faith actors, that suddenly is going to mean that everybody who follows or buys from that bad faith actor is somehow now going to know about you and show up on your door because you're the good person who's evidence-based, and they're going to buy from you. And that's not how this shit works, because you still have to do something to let people know about you, right? So we're never going to get rid of the bad people. And even if we somehow magically did, they still don't know about you and they won't give a shit about you, right? They're going to find somewhere else to go. So what's the answer? Discard the victim mindset and just show up every day to help the people who are already in front of you. Forget about everybody else. Forget about the people who are not there yet. Be of service to the people in front of you. Stay top of mind in your immediate network. If you do a really good job of serving those people, and if you are good at the skill of media that people engage with and share because they go, yeah, I wish I wrote that. Oh, that's amazing. I believe that people will share things as social capital to their followers. And if they do that more, it'll bring more people to your door, and it gradually will grow over time. And then more people will recognize the quality of your work and your ideas. But you have to be willing to embrace developing those skills, showing up consistently. And what do we as coaches often have to talk to our clients about? Not getting discouraged because they haven't lost the weight in 2 weeks. The scale hasn't moved. They haven't seen their body transform in the mirror. That they have to patiently do the thing every day. And when they get discouraged, to bounce back quicker and quicker so that way the wins add up. But yet they're often unwilling to apply the same formula to the growth of their own business, their own media, because none of this stuff happens overnight. It's funny how that works.
It's an interesting dilemma we face as a solopreneur, entrepreneur type, and then like you just said, that kind of victim mentality where why like we actually had Carter Good on, and I remember kind of feeling that way as he was like amassing the following when he was, talking about his like weight loss and his evidence and how he's supporting people. And here I am, like a young coach, being like, "What am I not doing? How come I can't? How come I can't create these things like he's doing?" And I just wasn't doing it consistently. And that was like circa 7, 8 years ago. Now I'm like, well, now if I spend my time doing that as a coach, I'm not actually doing the thing. And this is actually our guest yesterday mentioned this about like, leveraging other people and their skill sets to help you so you can make the most money with what you actually do well, which is fucking coaching, right? So, that's been a real new like kind of development that I know that myself and Seamus are kind of running into is like, hey, like there's just no more time for us personally if we have to do the thing and get the result. So now it's like outsourcing and building, a team to help with that slowly, and then really starting to like make that mission and vision come together, which
There's a
is a
there's
lot,
a few
lot of
things
work.
there. You're talking
Yeah.
about developing leverage, right? And
Yeah.
Naval Ravikant talks about this a lot. Alex Hormozy, who's a fan of Naval, talks about leverage a lot. And if you want outsized results, you have to develop more leverage. And so building a team is absolutely one of those ways you can do it. I want to get myself back on track here. Something else I think is really valuable too. I think a lot of coaches turn what we'll call content creation, the short form, obviously, which is the social media stuff, and then there's the long form, which is your writing. This podcast is long form, YouTube videos, etc. And they build this thing up to be this very arduous process. So there's several dimensions. First of all, well, we want our clients to ultimately engage in behaviors that have less friction. So sometimes that means shaping the environment, learning new skills, right? So we have to be willing to learn new skills as content creators. Okay. And I've studied right behind me. I've got a whole bookshelf full of books on writing. It's something I've studied for years. Now I teach this a lot, right? And I enjoy that. So I gravitate towards writing, whereas I find I don't love video. Now, time is a thing. So for me to turn around and probably do a lot of video-based content would be adding just one more thing in that I think probably is time prohibitive. I truly do think it is. Right? That's a narrative, that's a story, it's a limiting belief, but it's probably at least at this point an objective one. Now, I've also got people and I've talked to them about developing video-based resources and outsourcing some of that stuff should I pivot to that point. Cool. Awesome. So I know that stuff's there. That's a smart way to go. But I probably get greater leverage out of doing more writing-based stuff, which is writing for more publications, serving the publications I currently write for, and continue to use my social media the way I do with writing. That's probably going to get me the most outsized results. Now, here's the next thing. We can bemoan the amount of time that we have, or lack thereof, or we can actually take our experience from coaching the people that we're helping, all the knowledge, all the wisdom, all the experience you get from that, and just be very good at capturing the things that clients say or the questions that they ask or the ideas that pop into mind, and make sure you write them down right away. You capture them immediately in that moment. You say to the client in front of you, you just gave me a great idea. You inspired something. I want to write this down. It takes 4 seconds, 6 seconds. And you go right back to them. And they love knowing that they actually gave you something, especially if they follow your media. And then later on, you just turn around and you get better at deciding, all right, what form is that particular idea going to show up in? Am I going to do a 5-minute YouTube video? Am I going to take that question that this person asked and I've gotten 20 times before, and am I going to do a written and or video-based Q&A that I now have as a reusable resource that I can put in a library on my YouTube channel, on my website, or send out to my email list or what have you. So that way, in the inevitability that future clients ask that question, you turn around and go, that's an amazing question. I get it a lot. I'm going to give this to you. I want to discuss your specifics, but I'm also going to send you this article that I wrote. It's on my website, which you now direct them to your website. And I've got a lot of other, frequently asked questions on my website as well that you may find really useful. And then we can come back during our workouts and we can talk about the stuff and how it applies to you. You're not dismissing them, but you're building resources to serve those people. So we can look at these things as, well, a chore and negatively time consuming, or we can look at it as, well, there's an investment in here that's actually can make me more time efficient in the future and build resources that will then be able to scale across serving a larger number of people. So a lot of it's attitudinal. We do definitely have to have truly appropriate boundaries around how we use our time. We cannot do it all. And I think a lot of coaches will they may look at someone like me, and I seem to do a fair bit, Or you look at friends of mine, like I always talk about my buddy Luca Hosevar, who is an absolute maniac. And I do not understand how Luca has the time to do all the things that Luca does. But I'm always inspired by him. And sometimes I get very tired just watching him go, go, go. And I realize I can't keep up with that pace. But it's also really important you look at the people like your Brett Bartholomew's and your Molly Galbraiths and your Jonathan Goodmans, who are really good about showing the boundaries that they have around how they use their time, the time that they spend with their family, and more, that is a common theme with very successful people. Now, virtually all of those successful people also have had seasons where they worked at a level, a pace that most people probably could never imagine or sustain. So they worked very hard to get where they are, and they now have a really good appreciation for the boundaries that they need to set because family is important to them. So there can be seasons in your life.
Hey, for me, it's every quarter. Got 2 young kids.
There you go.
Yeah, seasons is. I mean, I'm already thinking about taking my son to his kindergarten class and how that affects my time and my schedule in 2 weeks from now. And it's something that we'll tackle head on and figure it out, and find a way to be more productive in the time space that life that will currently allow, and or allocating resources to be like, again, actually stick to the schedule of things versus let it stick in the head. I think you mentioned that, like, writing it down topic. Probably should carry a notepad with me, like old school, or a piece of paper, just to, like, because it does happen so frequently. Like, that's a great thing, and it doesn't matter if the real or whatever thing is created in one day, to like answer the question directly, but to sit on it and then like tag the person in that, then it's like, hey, by the way, this is the one that we talked about. I've done that quite a bit here recently, and whether it's a recipe or an idea that they brought up in the conversation, it's actually, again, like you just said, you're building the archive. Once it exists, once you're documenting that thing, it's there for forever. And pull the resource
document,
properly.
don't create. Yeah, that's what we're doing. I feel like Marcus and I are doing that with this channel of just like documenting. He even said it himself. Like, imagine like all the great people back, maybe before the internet, and they had amazing lives, but their kids will never know who they are parasocially just because like they weren't on. He's like, my kid can always watch me. He's like, well, what did Dad do on this day? Oh, episode 49 with Andrew. This is what they talked about, and it's to me, like, I love that. Right now I'm in a season. It's a sprint for me, just because I'm focused on building and doing a lot of stuff. I don't have kids. I don't have a mortgage to pay. I got no debts, nothing. So I was like, I looked at Marcus and I said, whatever you need, man, I will run this to the ground. I will run myself into the ground. But I do have those boundaries too. I know well within myself when I need to recharge my batteries and how to do that on a daily basis. And I think that's important, especially like you're talking about with other professionals or the people that we work with. It's like, hey, I need you to slow down a little bit here. I know you want to do this weight loss goal, or I need you to do this strength goal, whatever it is. Slow down a little bit. Don't expect the instant gratification. It's not happening tonight. It's probably going to happen in a few weeks or in a few months. So just manage your expectations just a little bit more.
Absolutely. If I try to remember exactly how Alex Hormozy puts it, but he talks about this thing as well as being able to delay gratification over a longer time horizon and being able to just put your head down and work really hard on something is a very big predictor of large scale success on business ventures, brand development, any of these sort of things. Right? If you can't resist even the most immediate gratifications on a consistent basis, you're not able to sit down and do the deep work that's required for a lot of the stuff we're talking about.
I had a question for you on that because you're a writer, and I've been writing a lot too the last year and a half since I went to an event that had Hormozy on. I think it was sales guy named Dan or something like that was on stage at Nutrition Coaching Institute, and he said, go on this article forum called Help a Reporter Out, haro.com, and every day they're going to send you something, and they need like a fitness thing. I've been writing a lot. I've been writing an article a day pretty much, and I've seen my writing change. But let me ask you, what have you felt has been some of the most pivotal moments in your writing to make your writing a little bit more succinct or get exactly to the audience in the way that you want them to understand what you're trying to put out?
There are a few, I think, elements or skills that you can pick up. I've read a lot of books on writing, and I still think it's actually a very good thing. The book On Writing Well by William Zinsser is a ultra classic. It's the Bible. Everybody Writes by Anne Handley. Very, very similar, just more references to modern media. And then you can kind of go a bit deeper. Another book I'll reference is Write Tight by William Broha. And what you'll get from all these books is the importance of understanding that your first draft is going to be terrible and you're going to feel really awful about it, but no one else has to see it. So if you develop the skill of being able to go in, separate yourself from the work, edit it mercilessly, and understanding simple things that can dramatically improve the quality of your writing. For example, instead of using an adverb and a very weak verb, turn it into a stronger action verb. And once you get used to these sort of things, or using more active voice than passive, if someone's interested, that they're better off kind of getting into these readings so that we can really immerse themselves in these concepts. And being willing to get rid of the flowery, run-on, fluffy way of writing that we can often be taught to do in high school, especially if you have any university writing, sort of literary writing. That is not good communication. When it comes to the end user, you have to write, it's not write down to them, but you have to write at a level that I think is a bit more accessible. And if you get good at this through practice, the second thing is simply practicing it, then it may take a number of drafts. I have written a lot of articles where I wasn't satisfied. It's not clicking, it's not flowing. And then all of a sudden, one draft, I managed to change a few words or reframe a few things, clean up some stuff. And I'm like, this feels like magic. And I don't reread all of what I do once it's published, but there's been a few that I've reread and I'm like, I love this. And it's okay to feel good about it. And it's the discipline to give it enough work and enough editing that it's good, but at the same time not be bound by perfectionism to where it's never good enough and you never ship the work. Sort of a Seth Godin concept. Another really good book for aspiring writers or creators of any kind is to read Seth Godin's The Practice, one of my true favorite books. It's going to really help you with your creative process, getting work done, but doing good quality work. And ultimately just becoming a better editor of my own work and understanding word choice and the way to structure things has dramatically improved everything. And then in terms of major inflection points, I mean, the other one was simply putting yourself in the space where you're practicing your writing and connecting with people. I mean, I got in with T Nation because we brought one of the editors, Danny Sugar, onto my podcast, and she was sensational. And she started looking at my media and realized I was already writing. So I was in a position, I'd worked hard to put myself in a position to benefit from luck, right? It was lucky break. Yeah. So she asked me to write something for them. So I put together something. They really liked it. They published it. They published more of my stuff. Had a couple articles rejected early because it wasn't, and I'm figuring out what they wanted versus what they didn't. And then after that, everything I've given them ever since they've been published. I had one published today as a recording here because I brought my buddy Marcus Martinez in. He's a kettlebell wizard. He's OG kettlebell educator. And there's a concept for an article I loved, but I probably wasn't the right expert to do it in its entirety. So I brought someone in, and I brought a number of coaches who are very accomplished and very well respected into T Nation because I felt that they would be great additions, because I can't get T Nation as much stuff as they probably want from me based on time. So how can I make sure that everybody wins? I'm feeding them great coaches. They have great material and great people. The coaches who have done what I feel meets a standard to introduce them or bring them in directly, they end up winning because then they get to work for this publication, which then opens up other opportunities. And being there, then that's when Generation Iron just emailed me one day back in 2019, or, it led to some of the other things and relationships through the industry. As I developed them, I was in a position to be able to say yes when they asked me to write something for them because I put a lot of time and effort into developing the skills. So yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, I'm going to take those exact answers and run that and do that, because my absolute goal, I put on my vision board here, right here. There's a Men's Health there. I'd love to basically write for Men's Health. Just get an article there. I mean, I've done Vitamin Shop, I've done Live Strong, I've done a few written places, but I'm like, nah, I want to get my skills up to the point where I'm with the big leagues, Vitamin Shop, T Nation, all these guys, and kind of be on a published press to say, because I think I would love to do that, but I have to get my skills there. So I'm taking exactly what you're saying. It's a heart, and I'm going to act on it, not just take in a book and read it and not change my behavior. So I appreciate that.
Let's take this one step further. Um, and again, I feel like I parrot some things that Hormozy says a fair bit, but he's right about this one. There are a few fundamental skills that are eminently employable and valuable and allow you to create great leverage and earn a lot of money. And one of those skills is writing, right? Whether it's applied to this type of writing or copywriting, specifically sales writing. Another
Yeah.
one of those skills is sales. Now, the ability to sell, and not in a unethical fashion, but simply just being comfortable with the process and selling something that you really believe in, which is what we all do. If you're good at sales, whether or not they're in the written form, and you're good at writing, those are incredibly valuable skills, and skills that will stay valuable even with the unknowns of the development of AI, right? Like a lot of people are very afraid of that, and we definitely know that as time goes on and adoption gets greater, it'll change elements of our society for sure. But if you can sell and if you can write, you're going to be very valuable and you'll be very employable, and you'll be able to do things at a very high level that can disproportionately earn livelihood, which is kind of good. And being able to sell and being able to write, being able to communicate allows you not just to sell. I mean, what is sales? But getting someone to buy into an attitude or an idea, change someone's mind, right? And if we want to see greater scale changes to influence the course of like the world on that level, we have to be great communicators, and we have to be able to get
Yeah.
people to buy into our ideas. And throughout history, we've seen people do that for great good or great evil. So, on a micro scale, when it comes to fitness and nutrition, if we are good at selling people on the ideas of evidence based nutrition, evidence based resistance training, and getting more boots on the ground in gyms, metaphorically or literally, then we're making the world a better place. And it's
Yeah.
essential to be able to communicate that stuff. And these are valuable skills. So I encourage any coach not just to dismiss this stuff and say, no, 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 all I want to do is just coach. I want to train the person in front of me. Well, if you can sell more people on the idea of what you offer, you can work with more people, you can change more lives, and you can earn a great livelihood, which allows you to actually stay in an industry that you love versus get tired of the ebbs and flows and the uncertainty about your income to where you decide that, well, I'm going to go and take a stable job that you're not as passionate about, where there's an illusion of stability, when in fact, if that goes south in various industries or different economies, you could go from whatever income you have to zero with the snap of a finger based on a layoff or some other sort of misfortune. So I always try to advocate that coaches, especially if you're passionate about this stuff, learn these skills so that way you actually can earn a great livelihood and have a great life. And Marcos, you probably know this yourself with two young kids. There's a lot of that we can do that we can actually be kind of flexible with our schedule, especially if we're doing a lot of our work online, which actually can make it easier to balance the role of being a parent and doing this at a high level as well. So there's a lot of opportunity here.
Oh, I agree. And it's definitely I think I use this a lot on here and say, like, I wish I had the mindset and the motivation I have now with my kids back when I was in my 20s and I didn't have them occupying
Mhm.
that, like, that quality time, right? But I think it also then makes you more driven in all areas and endeavors. And it's funny because you've articulated something here. Like, Seamus and I both have different mediums that we prefer in terms of our communication styles. And, it's like, again, learning how to leverage the best of those elements while still growing in those other areas as well. Like, I don't love writing to the degree that Seamus does, but I do enjoy it in the creative sense, and then trying to articulate a message that's very concise. And while my writing might only typically be in an Instagram caption, it's a different style of writing than I would do for an email versus, I've never really published anything on a web page, but I know that there's different ways of structuring that, like, visually at this point in my career, and I'm paying attention to those details to grab the attention of the audience. So,
Being able to write for email is one of the highest leverage skills that we have, right? And
yeah,
if you're good at it, but again, you pointed out captions, like people like, oh, I don't do any writing. It's like, well, what did you attach to your video on social media? Oh, I wrote a caption. You're a fucking writer, right? So, like, if we think about it in terms of identity, I have a presentation on writing, and this is one of the things I start with. It's if we can start with the fact that like so much of how we communicate with our clients and how we use social media, even if it's video based, there's still elements of writing in there. And if we
Mhm.
say to ourselves, well, actually, no, I am a writer, you don't necessarily have to be published on a mainstream, you know, platform or have written a book to be able to say, hey, I'm a writer. If you think of yourself as a writer, it's like the person who thinks of themselves as, well, I am a fit, active person. I am a person who eats healthy. Identity is at the root of most successful lifestyle change. I often reference this. James Clear's Atomic Habits is probably the best treatment of this, right? I think
Mhm.
everybody at this point in our industry has read it. We default to, especially when we're tired, when we're stressed out, we generally default to behaviors aligned with our identity. It's why it's very hard to maintain willpower to do things that we don't think are part of who we are. So, what's the answer? Well, shift our sense of identity, like evolve who we think we are. And even if it starts out as an aspirational identity, we're far more likely to feel to gravitate to or feel natural doing things that we think of as part of who we are. And sometimes it's as simple as making basic nutritional changes. Think of myself as I am someone who's developing healthy eating patterns. I am someone who's conscientious about eating healthy. I am someone who does writing on some of my media. And that may be enough to build a bit of momentum to where it extends into a more consistent or more involved practice. And who knows, maybe it involves formal writing, or maybe it never does. Maybe it's just like, okay, I just don't enjoy this. Cool, no problem. But there's other media outlets, like obviously this podcast being one of them, that you enjoy. So either way, valuable skill.
Oh no, yeah, I think to me, like my when I do write something, like even the caption isn't intentional. It has to have like a layer of my personality and my voice and whimsicality, right? Like, and if I can't get that along with the message, then I have to go rethink something. And it's like you said, like sometimes the muse is not being appeased because like you're just not in the right flow state. And like then you'll make every excuse in the book to not be writing or doing those things. And as of late, that's been something that's deterred my consistency with posting because I'm like, man, I'm just not in the right like mood to be writing something. It's really interesting, but sometimes the best way to get through that like lull is to just push through. Just get back into the habit of it. Like I am a writer, like you just said, identify with that thing yet again because before it was just fun, but now it feels serious. I don't know when there's like that extra layer of pressure, it
Hmm.
changed things a little bit, but now it's like trying to get back to that.
I don't have anything else to add to that. I will say this: I think the thing we said earlier about taking notes and having a notebook around can just allow you to better capture the things that stay top of mind, and it's a step in the process, right? So you feel like you've taken some sort of action, and then you can build upon it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you've mentioned that, I'm marking and clipping and writing a few notes down as because I have actually found that to be a better skill of active listening to understand the message that our guests are typically trying to project. And it is amazing because when I first did that, it was just to help the producer with like the general flow of what's going on, but it actually made me more engaged with like the actual listening process. And then it takes you back to school. You're like, oh shit, no wonder why you're taking notes when you're listening to a lecture. Duh, like the act of writing something down helps you with understanding of the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is gonna go sideways here, but it seems like you're a consummate reader and consummate like pop culture kind of guy. I noticed you like The Witcher, huh?
I love The Witcher. Hold on, let me pan my screen over. So here we go. Boom, there. There's three of my Witcher figures up on my stand and a lot of books. So pop culture is an interesting thing. So there are, I mean, I'll explain it this way. We are good at pattern recognition, and then we have things that we're interested in, and we assimilate information easily into frameworks. Lattice works is a good way to think of the mental model of stuff that we already know a fair bit about. So I grew up, my dad owned a movie store, so watched a lot of movies, played a lot of video games, and I'm a little more selective about it now, and I actually take very little time to watch movies or television. I don't have, I haven't had cable in years. I just watched the first 5 episodes of Witcher season 3. It's underwhelming. I
Little,
love Henry
little slow.
Cavill's. We'll see what the next 5 offer. Okay. I found that, I mean, I love the original run of Marvel movies up to Infinity Wars and Endgame. A lot of the stuff that they put out since, some of the early shows like Loki, Hawkeye, were great, wonderful. But then almost everything after that was really mediocre. And some of it I just skipped outright, and I've lost interest in it. Right. Same thing with Star Wars, and Disney and Star Wars have recently said they're going to like pull back on the sheer volume of the stuff that they're putting out of these intellectual properties, because I think they've been milking them and diluting the quality of them. But at the same time, I do tend to find that I enjoy absorbing and knowing about a lot of like pop culture stuff. There has to be a limitation, but because I easily assimilate it when I'm exposed to it, therefore I'm able to bring that knowledge into the lattice work that's already there. If you take me and start talking to me about carburetors and car stuff, even though I love the Fast and Furious movies, I'm not intuitively someone who understands the inner workings of cars. I'm not a car guy. So, people can start talking about cams and pistons and what have you. And I just don't have the lattice work to assimilate knowledge and information about that stuff, nor am I naturally interested in it. So what does this mean? Well, if you have these interests, they kind of manifest in two ways. One is you have to be a human to talk with your clients in front of you and have a relationship with them. And at a certain point, the technical coaching aspect of the real in-person experience runs out. Your clients get really good at stuff, and you want them to keep coming back. They're coming back for the relationship, the accountability, the experience, the way you make them feel. Right? They're not coming back because they need you to tweak their squat every single time they step in the gym. So you better have some depth of personality and some common ground and interest. A good example, one of my clients recently published his first book. And so he's an author, and he's very interested in writing. But because of my interest in writing, we've actually gotten into absolutely the weeds about a lot of different nuances of this stuff. And he actually acknowledged me in the book as part of the process because of just the depth of our discussions, because I'm very interested in this. And he probably comes in, well, one, he's retired, and he just wants to show up and be held accountable. And he's got the financial resources to do it 3 times a week. But I think probably the thing he enjoys the most is just the in-depth discussions about the progress of the sales of this book and then the evolution of the next one. We had a really good conversation yesterday morning when he was training with me. And it's going to keep him coming back. And then in between our discussion, we're doing the sets of the things he needs to do to stay metabolically healthy, strong, mobile, all of this stuff. Because as I said, he's a retiree, he's 73. So it's a win-win all around. But if I was a robot who only could talk sets and reps and movement, you know what? I don't think he would have stayed, because he's a big personality guy, right?
Yeah.
And for some other clients, it's sports. And for some other clients, God forbid, it's politics. I prefer to stay the bloody hell away from that crap altogether. But sometimes they like to talk about it. So at least there's a difference between being informed and being completely immersed in and fixated on this stuff. And, that whole mindset I can't do. So I won't even go into that topic. Forget that shit.
No, it's true.
So
You gotta be a human being. Go ahead, Marcos.
Yes. He wrote his first book at 73. I mean, obviously the process was a little bit like in his early 70s to 73, basically, writing process.
Yeah, I mean he's retired from a successful career anyway as a lawyer, and just became interested in telling a story. And his name is Neil Gower, and he just wrote a book called A Métis Man's Dream, because Neil he'd spent some years up in the Canadian North. And so there's a gentleman who is very successful, but kind of the difficult journey that led to this, entrepreneurial success of this gentleman, who has a really cool story, but a gentleman who himself would never have been interested in or able to write the book. So it became sort of something about the North, about business success, and about this man's, his name is Gordon Gill, his success in that realm. And then Neil's been my client has been very passionate about telling the story, and then, going around to different outlets and small bookstores and what have you, and having this book in the hands of more people. So it's been a fun thing to just be immersed within the whole process. But I enjoy the actual inner workings of the writing even more, finding the story and making it so that way it's told in such a way that it appeals to people, and understanding that people are more interested in how a piece of writing makes them feel than it about being the author, for example, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's never too late to try new things is basically the first thing, right? And then I think secondly, I've toyed with the idea of like wanting to write something for years, and I have an idea concept, but never put a word to the page at this point. And now I feel like maybe this is a spark of motivation to try that thing, and go through the like you said, more through the process and the endeavor, and less about like the outcome of it per se, because it does shape and change you in your school of thought for sure.
Yeah.
And if you sit down and decide, anybody listening, if you aspire to write something like long form, well, you get the writing process going, and well, it could result in some good short form stuff. But at the end of the day, if it just doesn't come to the form that you feel is what you ultimately wanted, it's a skill. It's practicing something. Maybe that one doesn't ever get published, right? There are a lot of very successful authors whose first book was never actually published, or the first books didn't take off, but it took book 2, book 3, book 4, and many years later. If I'm not mistaken, I think J.R.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit, or Lord of the Rings, I can't remember which came first. There's something in this that I may be getting wrong, but I'm of the understanding that he was just continuously working on it to the point where he never really came forward to have it published. And I think a friend of his actually, like, having read it, knew that it was ready, and swiped the manuscript and submitted it for publication. I may be wrong about elements of that story, but I think fundamentally that's kind of what happened. And well, there we go. Where would our world be if J.R.R. Tolkien had never come forward to have published Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit? We wouldn't have had Dungeons and Dragons, probably, which was overwhelmingly based upon the writings of the Lord of the Rings. And then that may not have manifested into, Magic the Gathering cards, and The Witcher probably never would have been written, and who knows, right? Like maybe we wouldn't even have Harry Potter. And who knows, right? But
Yeah.
that's how influential that was, because the guy decided, all right, I've got this story, and
Yeah.
ultimately it got published.
I'm reading this book right now. I was just telling Marcos about it. It's called Cube, The Puzzle of Us All. It's from Erno Rubik, the guy that created the Rubik's Cube. And the Rubik's Cube has been monumental and pivotal in my life. But he even wrote it himself. He said, if there wasn't that puzzle in the 50s called the McMahon's Cube or the Soma Cube, who would have thought that I would have made that cube? But then what was their interpretation of something else that made them, like, what was in the 20s that made that, you know, maker tinker and make another cube? And then it's like this lineage of like thought process that can go date back hundreds of years. And it's like you can point to that and go, if that didn't happen, we wouldn't be here today or have this influential today, because it's everyone is iterating on the last variation before them, and it's like they're just trying to make it better, or they're just trying to make it in their style, and you don't know what's going to hit. No one knew Lord of the Rings was probably going to hit. He just, like you said, he wasn't going to publish it, but then it hit. I think Ryan Holiday talks about this in his book, like Perennial Seller or something like that, where it's like, just keep going, just keep creating content, keep sharing, keep making, and keep helping, and keep being of greater service to the good in the world. And I think someone said it to us here on the podcast. He said, like, just keep making podcasts because you guys are like under 100 episodes, but maybe one day the 100th episode hits and everyone will then listen to all your episodes before. Who knows?
Chris Williamson talks about this with his podcast, how he did a lot of them before it kind of hit, and Chris's media and brand obviously has exploded. Alex Hormozy has said the same thing. There's a lot of people who've been in this boat. And to your point about, the legacy where things come from, Lord of the Rings is a classic hero's journey. And it's got a very similar story and plot point and character archetypes as the Star Wars original trilogy, as Harry Potter, as the Hunger Games, and a lot of other popular stories. And this stuff goes back to, I think it's Homer's Odyssey. And it's all chronicled by, I guess, a philosopher, historian named Joseph Campbell. The Hero with 1,000 Faces, I believe, is the name of the book. He's got other works as well, and talks about the monomyth, but ultimately talks about the classic hero's journey. And you can look at this stuff, and I really like Harry Potter and Star Wars as really good examples of fundamentally the same thing, Or again, you can look at, I mean, Gandalf and Dumbledore are overwhelmingly the same bloody character, right?
Yeah.
So if we can recognize this and understand that history, there's something else that I like to take out of this too, is there's not a lot of new ideas that a fitness professional is going to be able to turn around and create, unless you are literally on the cutting edge of some major research breakthrough, or you're someone like a Greg Knuckles or an Eric Helms or a Dr. Mike Izzardhell, who is really much immersed in the research based space on this stuff. Then yeah, you might be a little bit more cutting edge. But for everybody else, we're largely recycling basic nutrition and training concepts. But where it's valuable is your ability to communicate those things, your ability to write, or your video skills, or whatever sort of other skills. And it's your interpretation, your voice of doing something that serves the person in front of you, because the person in front of you probably has not consumed this stuff in its previous forms that have been treated by other fitness professionals or whoever else. But they need it now, right? They need it to show up in front of them today, and it's going to help them. And if you are ground into inaction because you're worried that someone else has said it before, you are leaving more space on media for the charlatans and the bad faith actors to fill up that space full of information that is not serving the people and misleading them, and oftentimes outright stealing from them. So if you're hesitant to share your own experience, your own knowledge, then I encourage people to take up some of that space. You've earned the right. You definitely have valuable knowledge and experience, even if you haven't necessarily been doing it all that long. And discard the narratives that are keeping you from doing these things. And even if the audience is small right in front of you, serve that audience well. Stay top of mind, because those people are probably not following all the other authorities in the industry, but you're their go-to person. And if the people who are part of your network, who are on your media, are people that you know from other walks of life, and they're not necessarily enthusiasts about fitness and nutrition at this point, they still know you're there. You're that annoying fitness person. And if something changes in their world, or someone in their world says, listen, I need to lose some weight, or I need to get healthier, or I need to get stronger, or whatever version of it, or that someone in their family has a serious health episode, and the person themselves says, shit, I need to make a change in my lifestyle. Or they walk up the stairs one day and they're tired and like, I'm sick of feeling this way. You want to be there, having consistently showed up to support and to share with good information, so the way you're the first person they think of, and they're going to reach out to you and recommend you. And you will always do well based on serving those people in front of you. And all the other stuff we're talking about, that's bonus, right? You want to be in a position where you get to use your media creation as a playground that you're not dependent upon for revenue, for your livelihood. And then you can do that stuff from a place of love and from caring. And you can build it and grow it because you can patiently continue to show up and serve. And that can actually lead to some pretty cool opportunities. And then those opportunities that you probably cannot imagine or anticipate at this stage, this has happened to me a lot, end up opening doors for you that you wouldn't have possibly imagined. And you can step through those doors and benefit from the luck, because you've spent the time developing the skills to put yourself in a position to benefit from that luck. There's not much there that I said I think is truly an original thought. I think that's sort of like greater wisdom. But if fitness professionals would take this stuff and apply it consistently over a long time horizon, really good stuff's going to happen.
Yeah. Couldn't say it better. That's amazing. Marcos, anything else to follow up on that? I just want to make sure that Andrew's appropriate on his time.
Yeah. I mean, really, I feel like what you described there was recency bias, and like always being on top of mind of people, even if they're quote annoyed with you. I see it with my wife. She has people that she follows. She's like, why do you still follow them? If they're like, if you don't want to like listen to them, or you skip through it, and they're like, well, they're just, they're doing their fitness thing right now. But when they post their life stuff, I like it. But you're right. Like then they're still reminded constantly that, yeah, hey, those annoying fitness guys or whatever are also delving into like conversations and endeavors that are kind of unique and interesting, right? And that's where, like you just said, like this playground is really what this has become, has manifested into better conversation, like becoming a better conversationalist amongst our patients, our clients, with everybody. And that's the skill we really were trying to hone in on. From episode 1 to now, it's like we're fumbling, we're following a script, and now it's like, have just candid conversation, try to learn and dive deeper. And I think what you said and articulated was really well put. But yeah,
I'll say this: anybody listening, well, first of all, you guys do this well. Got loads of experience, being on both sides of podcasts, many, many years of it. You guys are fluid. You ask questions. Your transitions are great. You guys are very confident on here. So, for anybody listening, I like to say this: if you've been listening for a while, well, these guys are putting time and effort into this stuff. So, the best way you can help them is to share this with someone in your world who you think could benefit. Okay, there's probably people. So it's that small little act of giving back because you get to enjoy all this free stuff. Because guess what? We don't get paid for this stuff. And if you're someone who is finding this from my media, go check out who else they've had on as guests. You may find someone you like and you might stick around for more. So guys, I really appreciate you having me on. I'm out of time. I apologize, but I appreciate this.
appreciate you too. And we'll wrap it up. Thanks again for listening. And everything will be listed in the show notes. We'll see you next time.